Christian Parenting.
Welcome to the Christian Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Steph Thurling. I'm the Executive Director of Christian Parenting, a mom of 3, and I am so glad that you're here. This is a place where you can bring your real self, no matter what that looks like today, and be given the space, resources, and encouragement you need to set aside perfection and grow into the perfectly imperfect parent God made you to be. I am loving summer and definitely don't want to rush this time, but fall is going to be here before we know it. And as you start to think about back to school, I want to encourage you to think about how you can be praying for your kids this school year. It's so easy to get caught up in the daily tasks of parenting, like getting school supplies, coordinating the schedules, doing laundry, making snacks, and then making even more snacks. But as Christian parents, it's important to remember the big picture. The one thing that truly matters is teaching our kids to know, love, follow, and share Jesus. I am so excited to tell you that the Christian Parenting 2024-2025 Prayer Journal is now available. A Life of Faith, Knowing, Loving, Following, and Sharing Jesus is a prayer journal from Christian Parenting that was created just for you. This journal will guide you in praying over your kids every week of the school year. Together, we will pray that our children will know Jesus as their Savior, love Him with their hearts, minds, and strength, follow Him faithfully through their entire lives, and boldly share His good news with others. Thousands of parents use this journal every year, so join us as together we pray that our kids will live a full life of faith. You can visit cpgive.org to request your school year prayer journal, A Life of Faith. Again, that's cpgive.org to request your copy of A Life of Faith today. And it is more than just a journal. You can also listen to Pardon the Mess podcast each Monday to listen to guided prayer and reflection that follows along. So go request your copy today. Hey guys, and welcome back to the Christian Parenting Podcast. I have a really fun guest today, Lindsey Medenwaldt. She is the Director of Ministry Operations at Mama Bear Apologetics, and she is just so wise and kind, and we had such a fun time talking together that I think you're going to really love our conversation as well. So over the next few weeks, we're going to be touching on politics, the election, but most importantly, how to engage in tough conversations with the people around you, which is really the heart of today's episode. This is a season that can bring a lot of hard topics to the front of people's minds. And so we want to equip you with some ideas to be able to handle that well personally and with your kids. So Lindsey's newest book is called Bridge Building Apologetics. And so today we are going to discuss that concept. What is Bridge Building Apologetics? And we talk about the need for humility and respect in conversations about both faith and worldview. And I really love how Lindsey emphasizes the value of genuine connections and the impact of planting seeds through everyday interactions. I think this is a really helpful episode, so I hope that you leave feeling encouraged. Hi, Lindsey. Welcome to the Christian Parenting Podcast.
Hi, Steph. It's so good to meet you, even though your listeners need to know we've been chatting for the last 10 minutes. They just missed out on such a wonderful conversation.
We are catching up on all of our kids and the differences, and we're like, we should probably just start recording and see what happens. Well, tell us, so since they didn't get to listen to our conversation, tell us about who you are and what you do, and then let's hear about your family a little bit, and then you have to use that one word or phrase that I warned you about.
Right. Okay. So my name is Lindsey. I am Director of Ministry Operations at Mama Bear Apologetics, and I live in northwestern Iowa with my husband Jay and our daughters Thalia and Annabeth. They're 13 and 11. No, she'll be 11 in August. So let's not rush that. And I adjunct at a college here in Orange City, Iowa called Northwestern College. I teach a couple of writing courses, and I teach a freshman class about what it means to get a Christian liberal arts education and why it's different than what they might get at a larger public institution. So I do that, and I do a number of things as well as I just wrote my first book, which is called Bridge Building Apologetics. So I think that's a little bit about me and a little bit about my family. As far as that single word goes, I would say eclectic, which sort of goes along with what we've been talking about before we started recording. We're all different people. And I think once we've recognize that as a family, it gets a little bit easier to live with each other. We recognize that we have different needs and different desires and different hopes and different dreams, and supporting one another in those things, but also recognizing that sometimes I need a break, or my daughters need a break, or my husband needs a break, or we need alone time, and being okay with that. So I think eclectic would cover it, because we are all different in our interests and pursuits.
I love the way God knits together families, though. Like, it would be such a boring family if you were all the exact same.
I know. And I would miss out on so many wonderful things that even my husband is interested in. Like, I wouldn't be doing apologetics if my husband hadn't been interested in apologetics. I wouldn't have gone to seminary. That would have never crossed my mind had my husband not had that interest. Now, he's super interested in psychology too. That's what he teaches at the college level. I'm not interested in that, so I just enjoy listening to him talk about that, but I'm not going to pursue that as something that I would like to do as a living. But he's very interested in, we try to learn from each other, the different pursuits that we have. When I went to law school, my husband was always interested in the things that I was learning. And okay, what did you learn in property today? Or what did you learn in torts today? And that was interesting for him, but he didn't go to law school. So we still have our separate interests, but it's fun to talk about those things.
Okay, let's pump the brakes for 1 minute before I go to my next question that I prepped you for. So you work for Mama Bear. You teach adjunct at a university. You have 2 kids. You went to seminary and you went to law school.
Yes. I did all of those things. So I got my college degree and my first master's before I got married. When we got married and we found out where my husband was going to get stationed, he was in the Air Force. He said, well, you've always wanted to go to law school. Why don't you take advantage of the time we have and go to law school while we live there? So I did. I went to law school, and I got pregnant 5 weeks before I graduated, and really had this conversation with my husband, like, what does it look like for me to be a full-time attorney and also be a mom? And for us, it looked like I'm going to put being an attorney on hold. That's not the case for all of the female attorneys I know, and they're doing great things with their practices and their families. But for me, it was, I'm going to pump the brakes on that, and I'm going to pursue motherhood now. And it's not been something that I've ever regretted. I do dabble in law now. I teach law students how to prepare for the bar exam, so I help them do that. But I don't teach, I grade, which is the same thing, really. I read their essays and I tell them, no, that doesn't work, or yes, you should definitely do that on the bar exam. But yeah, I don't practice law and I don't regret it at all.
I do have some friends who are attorneys, and it's tough to be a parent.
And it's tough.
I mean, yeah, for sure. So if you are listening and you are an attorney,
we are
amazing. Truly amazed.
Yes.
Truly, truly amazed. And also just amazed that you've done all that schooling and you've just done a lot of things. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to be able to spend a lot of time as a student. And, we've been able to get some of that paid for. So I haven't had to acquire a lot of debt either. And my husband is sort of the same way. We've just sort of gone back and forth, and who's in school and who's not in school, and what are we pursuing now? And I'm getting an itch, and I'm trying not to scratch it right now, because I would really like to get a PhD. So my husband got his PhD last year. And I am thinking, like, I would like to get a PhD too, but I haven't quite started to pursue that yet.
Okay, well, someday we're going to have a conversation on how you balance all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not easy all the time, and sometimes I have to say no to things that I really want to say yes to. But it's a lot of prayer, so communication with God and asking Him for guidance and to close doors, even on wonderful, awesome things that I would absolutely want to say yes to. And it's also communication with my husband. Like, should I do that? Should I go there? Should I participate in that activity? And really deciding what's best for our family, as I also continue to have a career, which is, in ministry, but it's still something that pulls me away from that active time with my kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my husband.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe you touched on this a little bit, but maybe you want to add to it too, is my other question is, what is one thing you want every parent to know?
Yeah, I think we need to be able to tell our kids we're sorry. So sometimes in times of stress or when we're hungry, we might act out or we might say something in the wrong way or behave in a way that isn't Christ-like or a way that a parent should behave. I think being able to humble ourselves and tell our kids, hey, I'm going to need a redo on that. I didn't quite phrase it the way I needed to phrase it. I didn't quite do it the way I needed to do it. And I'm so sorry. Will you please forgive me? It's great modeling behavior because we expect this kind of behavior from our children. How often are we telling them, tell your sibling sorry or ask for forgiveness or you need to apologize to so-and-so. And yet maybe they're not seeing that come from us very often. They need to see us apologize to our spouses if we get a little cranky with them. Modeling that kind of behavior in our homes allows them to understand what kind of behavior is acceptable out in the world or in their homes in the future. They're much more likely to model that kind of behavior when they have their own families. And so I say you're sorry. That's all I'm going to say. Say you're sorry.
That's good. And sometimes it's really hard.
For sure.
Sometimes I say sorry, but I have like the not so sorry tone, like my kids will do to each other too. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I'm sorry, let me try that again.
And I think being able to say you're sorry reminds you of how difficult it is so that you can empathize with your kids when they have to say they're sorry too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's get into hard conversations, apologetics, all of the super fun conversations.
Great.
We're going to talk about all that today because I think tell me if you think this is true. Do you think that we're actually living in a time that's like more divided than ever, or do you think we just see it more?
Oh, I think we just see it more because of the internet. I think it's like, we see the conflict because it's in our faces all the time, unless we're willing to unplug. And most of us are not willing to unplug. Right. So we turn on the news and it's division. Right? Yeah. Over everything. We pay attention to Twitter or X, I guess, or other social media outlets, and it's division. We're not seeing a lot of conversations between people who are on the same page or on different pages. We're just seeing battles. That's all we're seeing. We're not seeing the conversation. We're just seeing battles. Yeah.
I'm always so tempted to be like, we live in a time that's more divided than ever. And then I just reflect, I'm like, I don't really think that it is. It's just that our internet and our news sources make it just even worse. Right.
Yeah. The talking heads have it, right? Like we're just so absorbed in what's happening in the world. News didn't happen that way. Even when I was growing up, the news was on I think it was 5 or 6 in the afternoon. Right. And then at the 10 o'clock news, right? Yeah. And then maybe you could tap in the morning at 8 o'clock and get whatever happened overnight.
Eating your cereal.
But we weren't just on our phones getting 24 hours news coverage. And I think we were better for it. Yeah. And I mean, psychologists will probably agree with me. I don't have the study handy, but if I had to guess, we were better for it when we weren't obsessed with everything that was happening all the time.
All over the world. And every latest development. Yeah.
Everywhere.
And all over the world. And we are entering an election year. And that means people are going to be even more hyper-focused on all the ways that we're different. And so I think that this is a super timely conversation because you wrote a whole book about apologetics and how to get along when we disagree. And it's called Bridge Building Apologetics. So tell us a little bit about your heart behind it and why you wanted to write a book like this.
Yeah. So before people turn off the podcast, I'm going to define apologetics because a lot of times people will say, oh, apologetics is not for me, or I don't even know what that word means. Why would I want to pay attention? Apologetics is just giving a defense. It comes from the Greek word apologia, which means to give a defense. Apologetics is not apologizing for your faith. So sometimes people will ask me, well, why are you apologizing for being a Christian? You shouldn't do that. That's not apologetics. We're not apologizing for being Christians. There are apologists in so many different areas. So there are Muslim apologists and Latter-day Saint or Mormon apologists. There are atheists who will not call themselves apologists, but they are working to defend their worldview. So they are giving an apologetic for what it is that they believe. As Christians, 1 Peter 3:15 says that we should always be prepared to give a defense for the hope within us whenever anybody asks, and we should do so with gentleness and respect. So that defense is the hope within us. And as Christians, that hope is the gospel, and being able to give a defense for that being true. And so that's just the basic summary of apologetics. I hope people are now like, oh, okay, because the reality is that we're all apologists for what we believe, and we're already doing apologetics by the words that we speak and the actions that we take. People of the world are watching us, not like a stalker peering in our windows and going, okay, are they really behaving like Christians? But they do observe the way that we treat people in public, or the way that we interact with our neighbors. They're constantly observing us and saying, okay, they claim to be a Christian. Are they really living that way? And now Bridge Building Apologetics is taking two foundations. One, a firm foundation of truth, and two, a firm foundation of genuine friendship, and putting those things together. And now we're building a bridge to hopefully be able to share the hope within us. Apologetics has this misconception, I think, of apologists just being argumentative or wanting to always be right or wanting to always get in a debate. I hate debates. Even though I was a lawyer at one time, like, I just don't like arguing with people. It's not my favorite thing. And I don't think most people like to get into arguments with people. There are some who will poke until they've released the bear, right? But for the most part, I think we want to be in communion with one another in a way that we get along, even if we disagree. And so that's where Bridge Building Apologetics sort of comes from, is we can have these massive differences in opinion. Maybe we don't agree as Christians when somebody should be baptized, for example. But that doesn't mean we can't have a genuine relationship. Like, we should be able to talk about that and still move on as friends. And that's sort of where the book was born.
Save on O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner. Get 2 cans of O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner for just $8. Valid in-store only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Okay, I want to talk about the friendship piece of that a little bit that you mentioned, like the truth of the gospel and a friendship. Mm-hmm. Can you have genuine, meaningful friendships even when we disagree on something that's huge, like politics or especially religion?
I mean, I hope so. I have genuine friendships with people with whom I disagree on politics or religion. I have atheist friends that I care deeply about, and I know that they care deeply about me. I've got, friends that cross all political spectrums, and some who don't even engage in politics, and others who are like, woohoo, politics. I'm so excited there's another election coming up, and everything in between. So, I mean, from my own anecdotal experiences, yes, friendships like that are possible. What's required? I think we need to, like Paul recommended in Romans, is strive to keep peace with all men. And this means, like, one of the words we love in our family is shalom. And shalom isn't just the absence of war. Shalom is wholeness, and wishing wholeness on somebody else. And so for us in our family, shalom is sort of our word. What can we wish upon people, even if we disagree, and is shalom. So entering a conversation with somebody, especially a friend, when we know there's going to be disagreements, knowing that we have this desire for shalom in their lives allows us to enter with a different mindset. We're no longer trying to destroy them, right? We're not trying to demolish them. We're trying to have a conversation about what is your perspective and why. And then we're genuinely listening. So we're not just asking questions, hoping that we'll get the opportunity to respond. We're asking questions so that we can get to know them better. And that may lead to an opportunity eventually to share our faith, or it might not. But my hope is that people will enter conversations and relationships with people with no expectations, simply that they'll be there and they'll be that person that the other needs in time of need or whenever things happen.
I have a few very good friends who are not Christians, and we just have very different lifestyles. Like, they are single, basically on paper, we just have nothing in common, but we adore each other and we respect each other. And I learn so much from our conversations. Like, I come away being like, this is important stuff for me to know. Like, I learn a lot, and I feel very filled up in different ways than when I talk to my friends who, are in my little bubble with me. And so they're great. I value these friendships and I adore them. I did just have the conversation with one a few months ago where I was like, I just want to make sure you know exactly where I stand. Like, I'm making myself clear on what what I believe, right? And she's like, oh yeah. And I'm like, and also I'm not friends with you to preach at you, and I'm not secretly trying to save your soul or anything weird that people might think. But I feel like sometimes people have that idea that oh, you're just going to eventually, you're going to end up just preaching at me,
Yeah.
Which can be really hard.
So I think those relationships are generally called missional friendships. So you spot somebody and you're like, ooh, I'm going to make them my mission. I am going to make sure that I am going to find a way to share the gospel with them. And I will do whatever it takes to get there. I'm not advising that we enter into missional friendships with people. That's not a genuine relationship. Yeah. That's a missional relationship. And, there's a time and place for missional relationships, right? Like, if you're on a missions trip, that would be the time and place for a missional relationship. You're talking with somebody you might not ever see again because you might be in a different country or a different state. And your desire is to share the gospel with them.
Right.
But when we're talking about the people we see and interact with on a daily basis or weekly basis or monthly basis even, that's a little different. We might find unity around things that we enjoy doing. Like, I was in a film club once, and that was really, we don't have one here in this tiny town that I live in, but when I was living in Denver, we had a film club, and I joined it because I love independent films. And, nobody else in my family really is into it. And so I would go talk to people in this film club who weren't necessarily Christians, but we had that bond of, film and interest in film. Or some people really like music or theater. I think one example of friendship that is really interesting that a lot of people don't know about is between two Supreme Court justices from the United States. So Antonin Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg were very, very close friends. And yet they were on opposite sides of the political spectrum. They had so many ideological differences. And yet they found this rich, beautiful, genuine friendship with each other over opera, food, and wine. They would go on double dates with their spouses. It was just a beautiful relationship. They made each other better at their jobs. They helped each other write their opinions, even if they disagreed with those opinions. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I'm like, oh my gosh, see, it can happen. And we're talking modern day relationships when things weren't easy when they were alive. They both recently died. But, this idea of we can't be friends with the neighbor because they have this certain political sign in their front yard. We need to stop thinking that way because it's just simply not true.
Yeah. Okay. So how do we start the conversations with the neighbor who has the different political sign in their yard and you're like, you just live a different life than I do? How do we start a conversation with them in just like a really healthy way?
I mean, I think the way that we start a conversation is how we would start a conversation with anybody. Who are you? Obviously you know where they live because they're your neighbor, but what are you interested in? For me, like in Iowa, gardens are a big deal. Front yards are a big deal. It's super green and beautiful here right now. And so asking my neighbor, he's older, okay, what's going on with this particular plant? Do I need to be concerned? Normal, actual conversations about plants. Because I do not have a green thumb, and I need help in that area. And that's just a natural, no preconceived, like I'm not going to have conversations with him about faith at this point. Like we're just talking about plants. So I think as Christians, sometimes we're like, okay, how do we get to the gospel? Or what do we even have in common? Well, you have a lot in common. Just look outside. What do you see? What can you relate to? Maybe your town has a big event that it has every year. So our town has a big tulip festival. So we could talk to our neighbors about what events are you going to go do with the tulip festival? Or did you go see this theatrical performance by the kids last week? Those kinds of things are the normal conversations we should be having with our neighbors. We don't need to elevate things to a status of, oh, I could never have a conversation with that person, because now we're allowing the label to interfere with what could truly be a fruitful relationship, whether we ever get to that faith conversation or not.
Yeah. Okay. So then let's move into the faith conversation. So if you have kind of established this relationship, but you don't want it to be like that missional relationship, like we were talking about, like how do you, especially as someone who works in ministry, I feel like sometimes I feel like when people ask me what I do, I'm always like, ooh, are you gonna like, I've had people turn their back to me and walk away when I told them what I do, because they just don't want to talk to me. So I think I have a little bit of like fear when I'm like, I work in ministry. They're going to have a preconceived
Do you find yourself just saying like, I have a podcast? Like maybe just starting with that and seeing where it goes. Like for me, I'll say, oh, I teach at the local college.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like, okay, I can have a conversation with you now because you're not saying what you do in ministry. Do you do that?
Yeah, I'll like ease into it a little bit depending on the situation. There are different phrases I use where I'm like kind of just trying to protect the conversation because I don't want it to end, like I don't want you to think, I don't know, whatever it is that you're going to think about me if you find out that I work in ministry. But if you don't work in ministry and you're just having the relationship with a neighbor and you just want to bring up your faith, not again to convert anyone, but to be like, this is a huge part of my life. How do you know what to say and how to bring it up without feeling like pushy or, like you have these ideas that you want to,
Yeah. So as Christians, we are called to make disciples. We want to share the gospel because it's the hope within us and it's what drives us, hopefully, to do all the things we do in our lives. So Francis Schaeffer had this thing where if he was meeting with an unbeliever and he had an hour to talk about faith, he would spend 55 minutes asking them questions and learning about what they believed. And then the last 5 would be, do you mind if I share this hope within me? Do you mind if I tell you where my joy comes from or where my hope lies? And he found that asking questions really helps people kind of figure out, okay, what do I think on these topics? Because I think we're giving people a little bit too much credit that they've thought deeply about what it is they believe. A lot of times they don't think deeply about those things. Sometimes they do, but a lot of times it's I'm an atheist because my parents were atheists, or I'm a Christian because my parents were a Christian. And that's not good enough, really. We should know why we believe what we believe, so that we can say it if somebody asks us. But remember, in 1 Peter 3:15, it says, whenever somebody asks. So the hope is that that neighbor will ask, why do you go to church on Sundays? Doesn't it interfere with this that you could be doing? Why would you go to church on Wednesday nights? I mean, isn't Sunday enough? And talking about those things, they'll start to notice, oh, you do things differently. Why do you do things differently? So you may not be the one to bring up the conversation. You might be planting seeds. I love to call my mom a closer because she tends to lead people to Christ like every day. She could be at Walmart and strike up a conversation with somebody in the aisle, and all of a sudden she's praying, the prayer with them to accept Jesus into their hearts. I've never really been that person, but my mom definitely is, and my dad and I marvel at it. We're like, how? Because that's what her gift is. Her gifting really is being the closer. People have laid seeds in those people's lives over time. And then my mom comes in and she's like, so you've got all these seeds. What kind of fruit can we have? Not everybody has those gifts. Yeah. And I want to encourage people to know that you need to find your gift. What has God gifted you with? And use that gift. Remember, we're all parts of one body, but we're all individual parts coming together to serve God and to build his kingdom. And you don't have to be the closer. You don't have to be the person that brings them to Christ. Instead, how are you living your life? What are you saying to them that will plant seeds and not weeds?
Oh, that's really good. I love that about your mom.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's definitely an extrovert. And so she's just willing to enter any conversation with any human being. And it does usually end up in a prayer.
Oh, I love that. Okay, to kind of wrap up our time, since everyone listening, for the most part, is a parent, do you have any tips for if your kids come home from school and they're like, oh, someone asked me why we go to church, or someone asked my daughter, why do you go to a Christian school? Because they're on her dance team. Why do you go to a Christian school? Do you have any kind of just tips for how to talk to your kids about how they should respond in a just gracious, bridge building way?
Right. Well, I love that we're talking about maybe having those conversations with our kids first so that they're prepared if somebody asks them those questions. Because, a lot of times as parents, I know that I've said this to my kids, throw us under the bus. Throw your parents under the bus. If they ask you why you do something, it's because my mom and dad make me. Or, you don't have to necessarily give the theological reasoning behind why. If you don't want to, like my 10-year-old, why don't you wear, a teeny bikini at the pool? My parents make me, and that's a good enough answer for her at the time. We have those modesty conversations at home. But she doesn't have to give that answer necessarily. Or why can't you go to that party? Well, my parents won't let me. And it kind of gives them a break of I don't have to have an answer every time somebody asks me why we do certain things differently in our family. But as they get older, my 13-year-old, as she gets older and she's like, okay, I want to participate in the dance team. Great. Let's talk about what that looks like. What kind of music does the dance team use? Who are the leaders of the dance team? What kind of uniforms is the dance team going to wear? And why are we talking about these things? We had this whole conversation before she was even allowed to try out for the dance team. And she made it, right? She's on it now. So now we're having those conversations. Okay, how can we make sure that, you're protecting yourself and not being viewed as an object? So I think as parents, we should step back a second and say, you know what, maybe it's not our kids' responsibilities to necessarily give the answer for that every time. You could even say something like, it's okay if you ask my mom, because I don't really know why I go to the Christian school. My parents made this decision for me. I don't really know why we do this. And that's okay. Now, if they have an answer, if they're able to say, if they feel a little bit more confident, we go to Bible study on Wednesday nights because Bible study is really important. Do you know how important it is to know the Word of God and to know truth so that we can spot falsehood? And their friends might be like, wait, what? What do you mean spot falsehood? And that might lead to a deeper conversation. But if you could tell your kids, hey, we do this because, why do we read a proverb every day? Why do we have to try to memorize a Bible verse every day? Which is what we do over the summer in our home. Why are we doing this? Because we're guarding our hearts, because the heart is deceitful above all things. And we want to worship the Lord our God with all of our hearts and all of our minds and all of our strengths, and know the word of God is true. And that helps us, in spades when we're out in the world and people ask us for the hope within us.
I love that you talk about that in like age appropriate ways, and even just developmentally and comfort level. Because I think sometimes we put a little too much on our kids to be able to say, we go to Christian school because of XYZ, these are my beliefs, and let me tell you about Jesus. Like we kind of expect
and let me tell you about that curriculum that you're learning, right? Like,
yeah,
we can't expect our 10-year-old to be like, the curriculum is awful at the public school. Haven't you heard?
Because even if they know why, they're probably not going to say it well. They're probably not going to be great bridge builders. They're probably going to be a little too blunt.
Haven't you heard? Right. And kids don't have a filter, really. Right. My 10-year-old will say pretty much anything still. Yeah. And she hasn't really grown into that whole, okay, maybe I shouldn't say that, or I should say it in a different way. And there are ways to say things, and we can teach our kids how to do that at home. And we should be teaching our kids how to do that at home.
Yeah. But it can come in phases and slowly, and the expectation can be increased as they get older. I like that, because I think it gives parents freedom to tell their kids they can throw us under the bus. I like that. Mm-hmm. Blame me. Just blame me. It's always my fault.
Blame me.
I can take it. I can take that. Yeah. Okay. I love this conversation. Can you tell us where we can connect with you and get a copy of your book so people can just know what you have to offer in your resource? Because I think this is just a really timely book. So I think people are going to be really excited about it. So tell us how we can connect.
Yeah. How to get along with people, right? Yeah. That we disagree with. That's, I didn't know that was, this book started kind of being born 5 years ago. So I didn't really know what we were entering into, and God's timing is really everything. We need to trust His timing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you can find me at lindseymedenwaldt.com. You can buy the book there. There are links. You can actually, if you either can't afford the book, or maybe you are like, I literally have no space in my house for another book. It's on, ebooks or audiobooks, or ask for it at your local library. We're talking about, books, being accessible to Christians or non-Christians. The more that Christians ask for Christian books at libraries, the more accessible it becomes in our communities. The more likely that we'll begin to see change in people around us. So don't be afraid to ask for books at your local library. I'm not offended if you go and ask for my book at a library, because, I think more Christian books need to be there. And we need to show people, librarians especially, that Christian books are important to us.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good point. Really, if you go buy the book, go request it at your library. Yes. It's just a form that you can fill out online, and it does make a difference for an author. It's good for authors to have their books in libraries. And It just tells the librarians that that's what you want. So if you want to make kind of a really easy difference, go request Christian books at your library. Just go request like Absolutely. 10 at a time. Just go do it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on, Lindsey. This was really fun, and I just loved getting to know you today.
Thanks, Steph. I so loved getting to know you, and I hope we can do it again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay tuned over the next few weeks for more conversations about engaging with others, sharing your beliefs, navigating the political culture, and talking about it all with your kids. I have links to find Lindsey in show notes, so definitely go check out everything she has to offer. She's amazing. May God bless you this week. May you be encouraged in God's truth, and may you discover a peace that passes all understanding as you engage with the people around you. Thank you so much for listening to the Christian Parenting Podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And if you love this podcast, would you please consider leaving a review and sharing it with a friend? This is the best way to reach more people and encourage even more parents. Christian Parenting is a donor-funded ministry, and we rely on friends like you to keep podcasts like this going. So to find out more about Christian parenting and to make a donation, head over to christianparenting.org or at christianparenting_org on Instagram. Thank you again. See you next week.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Baker's, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Baker's worth it every time. Baker's, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.